Okay. Good evening. I'm Martijn Andrea, and today I chair the Planning Committee, which consists of 9 elected borough councillors, supported by a range of professional officers. It is the committee's responsibility to determine a planning application using current national and local planning policies and other relevant planning considerations. Firstly, the planning officer will present the application, and then only those speakers who have registered to speak will be invited to address the committee with a strict time limit of 3 minutes. Once the presentations have been made, the committee will discuss and debate the application, seeking clarifications from the council's professional planning officers where necessary. We can only focus on the proposals before us and only take into account what are considered material planning considerations. We welcome members from the public to attend these meetings. I would like to point out that members of the public, either supporters or objectors to the application, are not permitted to address the committee outside of the allocated public speaking section for each of them, or to ask questions, interject, or clap during the meeting.
And today I chair the planning committee, which consists of 9 elected.
Am I now being... Oh, okay, all right. Yeah. Planning proposals can often generate strong opinions, both for and against a development, but the committee business needs to be conducted in a professional and orderly manner without interruption from the public gallery. As chair, if there is disturbance from the public gallery in accordance with point 5.25 of the Council's Constitution, I have the discretion, if needed, to take a number of steps, including removing individuals from the meeting and clear parts of the galleries. Thank you. Madeleine, do we have any apologies? No. Can we confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, if everybody is okay with that one? Could I see a raise of hands if you're okay with that one? Is there any declaration of interests from the member? Have we received anything? Applications to be deferred and withdrawn. I think one of the items of the original agenda, the last one is withdrawn. Is that correct, madam? Yeah. Okay, then we go to the first application, which is the Keep Hatch Primary School. And I'll hand over to Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 59 and item 60, I'll do a combined presentation for members. I'll start with Keep Hatch and move over to Bulmershe afterwards. So item number 59 is a full planning application for the proposed erection of a detached single-storey building to form a new SEND unit with associated landscaping work at Keep Hatch Primary School. As set out within the officer's report, the proposed development is considered acceptable in principle, as the proposal provides additional education provision for vulnerable children for which there's a need in the Wokingham Borough. Development would be acceptable in terms of impact of the character of the area and would not adversely impact amenities of residential dwellings. Parking provision remains adequate and all the existing on-site trees will be protected. If I draw members' attention to the presentation, just a few images of the site location, the proposed block plans, some indicative elevations for you. If I can draw members' attention to the update paper, some additional information has been provided in the form of a highway technical note by the applicants, which has been reviewed by highway officers who are content with the information provided, subject to the conditions outlined in Appendix 1. The Keep Hatch application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and informatives within Appendix 1. Moving on to Bulmershe. Again, the application seeks full permission for the erection of a detached single-storey building to form a new SEND unit and associated landscaping. Again, draw members' attention to the presentation in terms of the site location, proposed block plan, the proposed elevations. Similarly, a further update, a highway technical note was also provided from the applicants, and the highway officer was content with the proposal. The only other update for this one was the revised wording of the cycle parking condition. The highway officers were content with the cycle parking, and as such, the wording of the condition has been altered. Again, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and informatives within Appendix 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now invite Mr. Gill on behalf of the applicant? Okay, you have 6 minutes maximum? Okay, no worries. Because you cover both, yeah? Is that
That's
right?
fine, yeah. So this is just to kind of give members of the panel kind of an outline of kind of why we're doing this. So ultimately, within Wokingham, we have a deficit of specialist provision. And in that sense, it's across all categories of need and all categories, all age categories. So we really desperately need more specialist provision in order that pupils with additional needs can be provided with education in borough, but not only in borough, but in a locality close to them, so that they don't have to travel long distances to get to education, and that education can be provided in the local community, and they can develop relationships in the local community and be kind of founded within that. So a large part of our SEND sufficiency programme is focused around these resource bases and SEND units at mainstream schools, which promotes inclusion and enables us to deliver much needed provision in that respect. And you'll be getting a lot of these applications coming forwards over the next few years. To be clear, we're delivering over 300 places we're aiming to deliver over 300 places via these types of provision over the next sort of 2 to 3 years. And these provisions align also with the emerging national policy framework to promote inclusion in mainstream settings for children with EHCPs. It's important to note as well that we have a lower than average number of this type of provision within Wokingham, so it's important that we promote their development. And it's also important to know that in the development of our SEND sufficiency statement, which kind of founds all of this, we did engagement with parents and families, and they were wholly behind us developing these types of provisions. They want more of these in number, they want more of these in terms of the range of needs that are provided for, and they want greater geographical diversity in that respect as well. And these two proposals form kind of a key element in terms of our kind of development of this programme. So I'll conclude there and say that, thanks to the planning officers for working with us on these schemes and providing their kind of their input on them, and the positive proposal tonight, which we encourage you to endorse. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Any questions to the officers? Okay, I had some small ones. Personally, I found these projects very positive for the community, so I just had two, if nobody else has, can I just ask two small clarifications on page 50? No, section 50. On page 23. I know this has been a flood zone, but the fact that WC trainees have no objections to this approach, that also, does that imply that there is no showstoppers envisaged?
No, Chair, they were content with the proposal as submitted.
And the other one is on 53, there's removal of 2 urban trees. Just for my clarification, sometimes these trees, during the breeding season, will that be avoided? I know in some cases we had some potential instances of that one, or unclarity about that one.
Thank you, Chair. The application would all sort of be covered by the Wildlife Act as well in terms of the removal of trees from the site. So those practices should be followed as part of the works coming forward. I think the school were aware of the ecologist comments from the proposal, and it's been noted that have to be outside of the bird nesting season. So they've been made aware of those provisions.
Caroline.
Sorry, can I have clarification about dropping off at Bulmershe School? I presume it is going to be dealt with under the travel plan, because it looks like the drop-off point is quite some distance from the centre.
Thank you. Yes, there's a travel plan condition imposed on both of the applications, so that further information, the highway technical note did cover some of those points that were provided, but it was still considered that a travel plan was required just to get a bit more clarification on that. There wasn't anything fundamental concerns on this. It was just we needed a bit more upfront, so that's to be as part of that travel plan condition.
Okay, thank you.
Mike.
Just to continue on that point, I'm unclear whether the drop-off or the access route is by Checkers Way or by the Leisure Road / Star Road access. Can that be clarified which it is? Because it seems to me, I seem to remember the application talking about 6 or 7 taxi movements. Just wonder where those are going to be in relation to the other school buildings.
My understanding, their council, was it's Checkers Way. I believe they're going to enter the school from. Was my understanding.
Okay. And how far into the site will they go?
I think it would form part of the parking plan condition and the travel plan details to be submitted. But my understanding is it would be, at the drop-off point currently in place, unless they're going to provide those details as part of the travel plan. I think there was, because there is a turning head further within, I believe, just opposite the sports court. But I think that's currently used for some outdoor dining. So I would imagine it would be at the main drop-off point currently.
Okay, thank you.
Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I think it's really good to see an application coming through in to support SEND schools. I think I think the fact that this application sort of fits within the wider sort of council strategy of sort of supporting SEND provision, I think is really positive. Sort of looking at the application, I think on design and build, I think it sort of is within what we deemed as acceptable. I think there's been no objections from any of the statutory consultees. I think from my notes, I think that they were happy with it, and I think there's been no neighbour objections. So I think sort of on balance, sort of looking at this application, I'll be happy to approve this.
If there's no questions, you want to propose this one, Sam? Do I have a seconder? Or, yeah, Caroline is a seconder. So this is the first one. We go first to Keep Hatch Primary. Can we have a vote? This is for sport, yeah? Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you. Are you guys prepared to do the same for the next one? So Sam will propose, Caroline will second. Could we have a vote on that one? That's unanimous. Oh, so both of these are in favor, unanimous in favor of the officer's recommendation? No, yeah. Shall we then move to the next application, which is the one in Ladd's Garden? I think. 2 minutes. Yes. Marcus, no, thank you. There were some updates sent yesterday. Did everybody had a chance to look at them? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening all. This is application number 252257 for the proposed erection of 19 dwellings with associated landscaping and access following the demolition of existing buildings and structures at the site known as Lads Garden Village in Hare Hatch. Firstly, just to update members, the update paper for this meeting includes clarification on a few highways matters, including the proposed pedestrian connection across the A4 and a complete list of the agreed heads of terms of the Section 106 legal agreement. There have also been updates to several conditions following final discussions with the applicant, and these should be
There were some
read
updates
together with
yesterday.
Appendix
Everybody
1.
had a chance to look at them. Yeah.
Could I ask Mr. Chapman to unmute himself for the moment? Oh, don't unmute yourself, please.
There have also been updates to several conditions following final discussions with the applicant, and these should be read together with Appendix 1 of the committee report. The application site comprises a parcel of land approximately 1.38 hectares in size, located off the A4 Bath Road. The site is located within designated countryside and the Greenbelt, but is surrounded by clusters of residential and commercial development along the A4, including 2 established garden centres to the west, as well as to the south of Scarlett's Lane and Millie Lane. Apart from the site's frontage, which provides a green buffer between the highway and the existing built form, the site is wholly hard-surfaced and occupied by several buildings and other smaller structures associated with the former garden village. The use of the site has wound down in recent years, with only part of it currently being occupied by businesses, including a landscaping company. The proposed dwellings to be sited at and behind the existing building line facing the A4, allowing for the provision of an internal access road, as well as enhancements to the landscaped frontage, which incorporates additional screening from the road, an attenuation pond and communal open space for future residents. An emergency dry means of escape is proposed to the south of the site.
Yeah, don't unmute yourself.
Oh, don't. Do or don't.
An emergency dry means of escape is proposed to the south of the site connected to Scarlett's Lane. This is a requirement of the submitted drainage strategy due to the risk of surface water flooding to the north of the site. The access will be locked at all times and only accessible during an unlikely extreme surface water flooding event. It is not available for public use and would not function as secondary access to the site. When assessed solely against the adopted development plan, the proposal would be contrary to policies restricting development within the greenbelt and countryside, and the redevelopment of the site for residential use would be a departure from the development plan. However, the local planning authority is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and local policies relating to housing development are considered to be out of date. Nonetheless, this does not mean that they hold no weight. The proposal, therefore, must be assessed against the NPPF as a whole, with a particular regard to Chapter 13, which concerns development within the Greenbelt. A key consideration for this case is that the site is previously developed land. Paragraph 154 of the NPPF states that any redevelopment of previously developed land within the Greenbelt could be deemed as not inappropriate, subject to it not resulting in substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt. In this case, the proposed development would not encroach beyond the existing built envelope, would not be isolated, and would result in a 36% reduction in built footprint and 62% reduction in hard standing on the site. While the proposal introduces an increase in the volume and height of built forms spread across the site, the dwellings would read as less dominant and intrusive than the existing commercial buildings. The volume and height of the dwellings are also in keeping with neighbouring properties within the surrounding area. When taken as a whole, it is considered the proposal would not give rise to substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt. The layout of the proposed development reflects a loose-grain, informal arrangement which is appropriate for the site's semi-rural setting. Generous separation distances between the buildings and the site's boundaries, alongside enhanced landscape buffers on the boundaries, prevents the proposal appearing as a cramped, uncharacteristic form of development. In comparison to the existing, largely ad hoc spread of commercial development on site, the proposal would have a legible and coherent layout which creates firm visual permeability through the site and is less visually intensive than existing commercial use. The design of proposed dwellings would reflect the site's semi-rural setting and a mixed local vernacular and is acceptable. Subject to final details on landscaping being secured by condition, the council's landscape architect has raised no objection to the application in terms of its impact on the wider landscape. The proposal would provide 2 1-bed and 2 2-bed flats, 12 3-bed and 4 4-bed dwellings. This is a positive housing mix which reflects the priority need for 3-bed units within the borough, as well as a notable contribution to the need for smaller residential units. The proposed mix would also not be wholly out of character and represents an efficient use of land while assuring that the scheme does not result in overdevelopment of the site. The proposal would alter the site's existing vehicular access and introduce a pedestrian access point onto Bath Road, connecting with the proposed refuge island and the existing pavement along the northern side of the road. These measures are secured via the Section 106 agreement and the separate Section 278 highways agreement. Following the submission of further information to demonstrate acceptable visibility displays, the council's highways officers have raised no concerns with the proposed access on highway safety grounds. Overall, no adverse highway safety impacts resulting from the development have been identified. It is recognised that opportunities for sustainable modes of transport in this location are limited. However, the agreed off-site highway improvements would improve pedestrian connectivity and safety on the A4. Moreover, the site's context as a previously developed commercial site must be taken into account, and a proposal would result in a negligible increase in traffic movements compared to the site's existing lawful use. When assessing the application as a whole and considering the tilted balance, the economic benefits are considered to hold moderate weight in favour of development. In terms of the development social role, this would be positive, with the provision of 19 dwellings being a meaningful contribution to the council's housing land supply position and a positive housing mix together deemed to hold significant weight in the balance. From an environmental perspective, significant weight is given to the redevelopment of previously developed land, which will not give rise to substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt, such that it is not inappropriate development in principle when assessed against the NPPF. It is recognised that the proposal would not be located in the most sustainable location as required by the local plan. However, this harm is reduced to moderate weight against the proposal due to the existing context and use of the site and some sustainable transport modes being available. To conclude, the proposal would redevelop an underutilised commercial site, improve the visual appearance of the site and wider landscape setting, provide a good quality mix of housing, deliver strong biodiversity net gain and sustainability benefits, and would not give rise to unacceptable impacts in terms of other material considerations. It is therefore considered that no adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits arising from the proposed development when assessed against the policies in the MPPF taken as a whole. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and informatives listed, as well as the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Mr. Chapman now to present? Mr. Chapman, I believe you will be presenting online. There might be a delay. Mr. Chapman, can you hear me? We could hear you. I think there's a bit of a delay between me speaking and him answering. Yeah, because
He's not responding. He's just, yeah, but him being muted will not stop him hearing us.
Mr. Chapman, can you hear us? I think we can see you online. Oh, these tables are a bit familiar. Okay. Maybe if you put that on, okay, let's go for that one then. Maybe put that up and then
He might see it.
he might see it, yeah.
I believe you are presenting for me.
Mr. Chapman, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but there is a 5-second delay.
We could hear you. There's a bit of a delay between. me
Okay, we
speaking
will
and him.
we will put the presentation on.
But please,
Because
Okay, and then could you then go back on mute again, Mr. Chapman?
I will.
Thank you.
Yes, I can.
I think we can see you online. Okay. Maybe if you put that. Oh, okay, let's go for that one. Maybe put that up and then see. He might see it. Yeah.
Sorry, it's getting seconds.
Evening. My name is Simon Chapman. I live at Warren House in Scarlett's Lane, and I have to object to this application. Visualization shows how the lad's site sits in open countryside at the rear. Clearly impacts my house and all walkers, cyclists and equestrians using Scarlett's Lane. We've not been allowed to assess the impact of this plan because the developer failed to give us the promised street-level visuals, and their sole photograph from Scarlett's Lane was misleading. Here's the real-world view. We will see far more of these inappropriately tall houses, including their high windows, than we can see of the current buildings, because they are almost 2 meters higher than the highest point now on the site. Scarlett's Lane won't need streetlights. Also not immediately obvious, this plan extends the high point of the built form some 75 metres closer to Scarlett's Lane. This is to enable the developer to charge more for houses which are further removed from the A4 traffic noise, but to the detriment of all who enjoy this beautiful rural landscape. We're blessed with precious dark skies here. No streetlights, housing estates or office blocks. Government guidance is clear that permission should be refused where new light sources would be conspicuously out of keeping with local nocturnal light levels. This photo was taken at 8:30 p.m. on a day when the former garden centre was still trading. This sky would be lost forever if this plan is approved. This application is clearly not without detriment to the amenities of adjoining land users or residents and their quality of life, and it will destroy the rural character of this historic leafy lane. For many reasons, this application is wrong for this location. Please send it back to the drawing board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Could I ask now Mr. Rumble to talk on behalf of the applicant?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. The NPPF supports the redevelopment of brownfield land as appropriate development, providing it does not cause substantial harm to greenbelt openness. The scheme comfortably meets this test, including by reducing the overall footprint and hard standing on the site and development being set back behind green landscaping. The proposal offers many benefits, in particular 7. 1. It comprises brownfield land redevelopment actively prioritised by national and local policy. 2. It provides 19 dwellings at a time of acknowledged significant housing shortfall and in a circumstance where the tilted balance is engaged. 3. It offers a genuine mix of dwelling sizes but is guided towards family-sized accommodation most needed in this locality. 4. It enables the removal of existing large commercial buildings of a functional appearance and their replacement with a high-quality designed residential environment at a low to medium density. 5. it involves a reduction in built form and hardstanding and a substantive increase in green landscaping when compared to existing. 6, the provision of on-site BNG at a level comfortably above 10%. And 7, a package of off-site highway improvements, including a new pedestrian crossing point and other financial contributions, totaling circa £200,000. Further, the scheme exceeds all DM guidance in relation to impacts upon neighbours and is appropriate in scale, mass and height, especially within the context of the reduced built footprint secured through the proposals. Lighting is to be conditioned. Over the course of this application process, we have worked closely with your officer to progress a detailed and comprehensive application. The result is an attractive landscape setting featuring high quality traditional architecture and a scheme that strikes the appropriate balance between making efficient use of this brownfield site and securing a character-led design. The considered design put before you tonight has been positively received by the local community with 22 letters of support, no objection from the parish and only 9 letters of objection. Westbourne Homes are an award-winning Wokingham-based development company who are committed to delivering a high-quality development on this logical development site in the short term. Rightly, the scheme is recommended for approval by your officer. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rumble. I would like now to open the floor. Wayne, go ahead.
Sorry, some points of clarification first, Marcus. If we could just go to the update paper, please. When we were on site, there was some discussion about the crossing. It was indicated it was going where the existing one is, not to the right. I'm happy with the right. As you come out of the access to the building, it's got proposed. So this piece of paper here. So if you come out, turn right, and drive down the A4, that's where the proposed site will be. Correct?
The diagram, which has for whatever reason is not copied over, printed properly on the update paper, it says existing site access junction retained, and then proposed pedestrian refuge island crossing.
That's right.
To the left of it.
Yeah, so that's as we discussed on site. But if you look at the crossing. Sorry?
The circles are showing speed limit changes.
So where is the crossing is going to go where the proposed, the island is as the access into the site, the footway, pedestrian access into the site.
It's, if you can see the 2 arrows pointing up, it's the one on the left-hand
There.
side. Yes. Would it be helpful to share it on the screen?
It would, because you can't read this.
So that's the site boundary in red. Then you've got proposed pedestrian refuge islands. So the vehicle access is here. And then the crossing point is down the road to the east here.
Yep.
More detailed plan is shown on the site layout plan and within the highways assessment.
So if you just move along to where it's got 40-40,
Yes.
you've got 50-50.
So that's existing
Yep.
speed limit
Yep.
where it changes to 50.
And then you go about 200 yards along the road and it's 50. So along the A4, this is one for highways. We're going to go down the A4, we're going to go 50, we're going to go 40, we're going to go then back up to 50 within the space of half a mile. It'd be like driving in the Westway in London. Why can't we have some common sense prevail and we take the 40 from the point in your patch and then take it to the further point. If you drive along, sorry, if you go along on your next one along, sorry. So you see there, it's got, what does that say? I can't read it, but it's not 40 the other side because it's 50.
What this is showing is this is to the west of the site. This is where, if you're driving up from Twyford Way along to Maidenhead, this is where the existing sign from 40 to 50. What this is showing is that these signs would be removed and they would be moved east past the site's access and relocated up here. So the 40 miles per hour would carry on from Hare Hatch, past the site's access, and then you go back up to 50 this way. It's showing 50 on this side because that's where the 50 sign is, 40 on the other side because traffic going the other way is now coming into 40.
So how far up? So where has someone from highways studied the A4 and worked out? Because if you're only going to change the point here to 40 on that very dangerous bend, what's the speed post? Is it 40? So it's, well, it goes up to 50 past the Squires Garden Centre. And up here it's 50. So that's why I'm trying to get clarification. So are we going to have almost from the Wargrave roundabout all the way to Knoll Hill 40? Yeah.
It's from the Horse and Groom pub, it's 40 up till the existing point here. Yeah,
It's
and then
40.
it goes 50.
50 up.
And then what this proposal says, instead of moving from 40 to 50 here, it will be moving from 40 to 50 further down. What I'm maybe paraphrasing you, you would like to see this one moved further along.
Well, I just think it just seems unlogical that we're going to put drivers on a road and then we're going to be moving them from 40 to 50, from 40 to 50, to 40. That is what happens. If that is, yes, it is. So if it is, I live there. So if I'm driving from Knoll Hill, I'm in a 40. Then I go into a 50. Then I get to that point there, I go back into a 40. I get to the Horse and Groom, I'm in a 40. I get past that, I then get into a 50. I get to the Wargrave roundabout, and then I go into a 40.
But that's how it is at the moment.
No, but what I'm saying is, this is an opportunity to correct that.
Okay, that's,
'Cause if
okay, I hear you, yeah.
You with me?
Councillor, would you like me to respond on behalf of the Highways Authority to this query?
I would. That's what I wanted at the beginning.
I was just waiting to hear the full extent of your views on the matter. The change in the speed limit has been assessed by colleagues of mine in the Highways team, and they're happy with the principle of moving this speed limit change further east along the A4. I think what's important to note here is that any change in speed limit is subject to something called a traffic regulation order, which involves a process of public consultation. And within that consultation process, it would be possible for residents and councillors, as representatives of the residents, to express their views on the change in the speed limit and for amendments of the extent to be made. The cost of changing a speed limit is mostly spent on the signs and on the paint on the roads, and there isn't too much physical difference in the cost in terms of where the change happens. So the Highways team satisfied with the change in the speed limit east of the site. And if there are any concerns about the extent, that can be adjusted in the TRO process.
Okay, so the answer is, when the TRO comes out, we get residents to express their concerns.
allowed within the TRO.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thanks. I'll move on. Sorry.
Mark, you want to go
Just to
in?
labour that point, I think if you look at that road, there's a dual carriageway section between Sonning and the Wee Waif roundabout, which is regulated at 50, and it's 40 from the Wee Waif to Wargrave roundabout. Then it goes up to 50, then it goes back to 40. And I think what Councillor Smith is advocating, I would too, is that it ought to be 40 all the way from the Wee Waif to this proposed 50-mile-an-hour change.
Well, I would go a little bit further than that, Mark,
Yeah, make it all the way.
because Windsor and Maidenhead have done the right thing, and theirs is 40 at Knoll Hill, and all we've got to do is go, as you say, from the Wee Waif all the way up. But sorry, I don't know your name, Ben. As Ben said, we have an opportunity for that, because I know that that's already in the Safer Roads proposal from Charleville Parish Council, so we can pick that up in the TRO. I'm happy with that. Okay, so if we can just pick up some of the other points, and I did mention this at the site visit. So some points around character, street scene, height, massing. Could I have clarification on the slab level? Because when we were on site on Friday, that site does travel up from the A4. So, and it seems quite considerable. So where are we going to draw our slab levels from?
In what context?
Well, are we going to take the datum from the bottom of the site? So, for example, if you go to one of your plans and you take, as you come into the site, is a considerable difference between the bottom of the site and the top of the site. And that will have a detrimental effect, as the point that the gentleman was just saying. If we could keep that level sensitive to the beginning of the site, so shall I show you on here? You can see it there.
So the idea is that you wouldn't, if the site isn't being levelled, just to make that clear, because obviously that would mean proposing a massive retaining wall at the back of the site to keep it level from the front. So that's not happening. The idea is that the houses will fit in with the existing ground level changes. So the houses at the bottom, to the south of the site, would sit on lower ground than the ones on the top.
Okay. So if that's your proposal, can we ensure, and the planner was on Friday, did say that they would do this, can we ensure that on those, it's the east and south boundaries, that we have mature shrubbery, trees, etc.? Because I could only see 2 elevations from the site, but there are some gaps. So if we could ensure, if you are travelling up, because I would imagine it's quite a difference in slab heights, if you are travelling up, can we make sure we have a strong condition on landscaping? Yep.
Yes, so landscaping details have not been agreed at this stage. They're secured via condition. So we've had a lot of discussion throughout the course of the application of bolstering up all boundaries and trying to screen the site as much as we can. Landscaping will mature over time, but the landscape proposals are indicative at this stage, and we can definitely make sure that the east and south boundaries in particular are screened as much as possible.
Okay, thanks for that, Marcus. Street lighting, again, ditto the first one. I would much prefer low-level lighting. We don't need any more street lighting. We got that on the A4. And I think then you would create an issue against the openness of the green belt if you were to put in, street lighting. I will go back to this footpath because it still amazes me. I didn't realise water travelled upwards, but it is the escape route, a flood resilience measure, I don't understand why that flood route couldn't be onto the A4. Right, you'd flood the A4, but if it was that bad, I think the whole area would be flooded. I don't know why we've got to travel it up through the site and out onto to the narrow road at the top of the site. I understand it's going to be locked, and I appreciate that update you gave us on Friday, but I still don't understand why it's got to be there.
Just to start with the lighting, your lighting query, condition 16 is an external lighting strategy for biodiversity, but that also include environmental impacts as well in terms of like actual visual light pollution. So both ecologists and myself and potentially environmental health as well will look at light pollution emitting from any external lighting. So that condition secures an appropriate lighting strategy, not only for biodiversity, but for the site's location. There's a drainage. Paragraph 121 of the report forward goes into detail on the situation with the risk of surface water flooding at the top of the site, adjacent to the A4. It's within a up to high risk of surface water flooding, 1 in 30-year event affecting the northern part of the site. This remains limited to the north, but because of that, the flood risk assessment, which has been independently produced on behalf of the applicant, has recommended that this footpath to the south, in the unlikely event that the access becomes inaccessible, unusable, they have an alternative means of escape in the serious event. This was discussed with my colleagues in flood risk and drainage. Whilst it's a slightly peculiar situation, it's not unnormal, unusual. There's similar situations to this. And through securing management details on that access via condition, we can make sure that it's what it's supposed to be, which is a dry means of escape only.
Permanently locked.
And permanently locked. And access in the unlikely event managed by the management company for the estate. So we did consider whether it could be removed, but ultimately, because of the technical reason for why it was proposed, it was decided that if we could just secure the management, there's no harm arising from that on public safety or access, etc.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sort of suggesting it was your idea. I'm sure you've got better things to look at. The green infrastructure off-site contribution. So that will be maintained in the Walgrave parish, because this sits in the Walgrave parish. So this is because we discussed on Friday, there being no facilities on site for children, play area, etc. So that is that 169 that contribution towards that, or is it something completely different?
So the 169 contribution, that goes towards different typologies of open space. So that includes public open space and things like allotments, cemeteries, like any big housing development contributes to, and the sports facilities as well. The money collected through the obligation goes towards the green infrastructure team directly, and they decide what to do with the money. I think it's about £60,000 of it is going to go towards the Grays Farm sports facility, which is proposed. But apart from that, the rest of it will be spent by the green infrastructure team, and it's separate from us.
So 60 grand is going to go to somewhere which would take them about 25 minutes to drive. That's ridiculous. I mean, this money should be spent in the parish. I mean, it's not for now, but you know, it's ridiculous. Anyway, And the biodiversity on the site, where is that? Is that on the wider site?
The biodiversity net gain is within the site's boundaries for this application.
It's in the
red line.
application red line.
Yes. It's about 90% on-site enhancements and then 10% off-site through the purchase of biodiversity credits. So it's mostly coming from the enhanced green edge at the front. It's mostly coming through planting from that, also the landscaping on the boundaries. So that's how it's mostly being achieved. But there's a slight shortfall, which is being compensated for off-site.
And off-site as in, can you tell me where? Is it off-site as in adjacent fields or is it miles away?
It's through the purchase of biodiversity credits.
Right, yeah.
So, and that gets agreed via the statutory biodiversity game plan condition. We don't have that exact detail at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Caroline, and then I'll come back.
So it's just a quick query. When Mr. Chapman was talking, I couldn't understand exactly where his house was in relation to the site. Because when we went to the visit, there was a large house to the right. Is it near there? Thank you.
It's further south to the east on Scarlett's Lane. So you remember when we were at the bottom, there's like a house here and a new house there. It's further down south and then along the way.
Moses.
Thanks, Chair. Just have one or two questions. One is on affordable housing. So we have a policy expectation of 40% affordable housing. So how can a contribution of 36K be reasonable in lieu of affordable housing?
So the policy, you're right, its policy expectation is 40%, but the policy clearly states, as well as the MPPF, that that is subject to a viability review. So on the offset, the applicant informed us that they weren't going to be able to do on-site affordable housing provision, so they had an independent viability assessment carried out by a consultant. That was then reviewed by an independent consultant appointed by the council officers. And then further discussions took place between both sides until the figure on the Section 106 agreement was agreed. So the independent viability review conducted by the council concluded that at doing 40% affordable housing on site would deem the development unviable entirely. But if they were to do 100% market housing instead, that does allow a small surplus, which can be made available as an off-site contribution. So throughout the process, it's been independently tested. We've had a lot of discussions back and forth, and that was how the independent consultant came to that figure. And policy, because it's gone through the viability review, it does comply with the policies that I mentioned in the report.
So you think 36K is reasonable? Okay. So we went there on Friday, and you did indicate that the bus route is not very good. So how can this site be deemed to be sustainable when the residents will be primarily reliant on cars, the use of cars?
So the highways officers have determined that it's not a sustainable site in terms of accessibility from sustainable transport modes. When assessing the application as a whole, that forms part of the tilted balance and how much weight you give that harm. In this case, it is acknowledged that it's not a sustainable location. However, there are mitigating factors which reduce that harm in the tilted balance. So the site is not isolated, its existing development has already got traffic coming to and from, especially if the existing use was picked back up and the site became fully operational again, you'd have a similar amount of traffic. It's a negligible increase in traffic compared to the existing use. So it's already a site that is being used within countryside and people driving to it and back. Also, it's not fully isolated with the pedestrian connection that is being done off-site. That improves pedestrian connectivity onto the pavement at the north of the A4. And then also there is an example of a bus service. So those sort of factors, and I'll let Ben clarify. But for those sort of reasons, it was given moderate rate in the planning balance.
My question is not about highway safety. My question is about the frequency of the bus service that makes the site, means that the residents will primarily be using cars. So the issue of sustainability is what I'm talking about, whether it is safe or not. I'm not talking about highway safety. I'm talking about public transport, active travel, whatever you want to say. So if buses come every hour or so, then residents are going to be reliant on cars.
Yes, I think I understand the question, councillor. It's about the sustainability of the site and access by sustainable transport modes. So that's walking, cycling, bus and rail. So I can just outline the Transport Authority's position on that quickly for you in response. We have objected based on sustainability concerns with the site. There's a limited number of everyday facilities within walking distance of the site. There's an hourly bus service which goes to Reading. It stops at Waitrose in Twyford, so you could use that bus service to access Twyford railway station, but it only comes once an hour. Despite that, there's very limited accessibility by walking and cycling. We sought to improve this as officers by asking for an improved quiet lane to the rear of the site down Castle End Road, where we asked the applicant to reduce the speed limits to 20 miles an hour and introduce speed reducing features to make Castle End Road friendlier for cyclists, because at the moment cyclists have got the choice of cycling along the A4 with its high speeds, or Castle End Road, which I believe's got a national, Castle End Road's narrow, it's got a national speed limit, there's no lighting. So we pushed to get an improvement on that. That would have included a connection via Scarlett's Lane through the flood emergency access route, which has been discussed. However, the applicant declined to offer these improvements. So, yeah, when assessing it against the MPPF, we're required to consider access by all modes to the site. And the MPPF says that applications for development should give first priority to pedestrian and cycle movements. So, you know, as transport professionals, we felt it was fairly weak on pedestrian and cycling. Yeah, so I think that explains our position on that. But I would have to point you back to my planning colleague, Marcus, and what he was saying about the tilted balance and his recommendation on kind of wider issues and benefits.
Yes, the issue of detailed balance is always an issue, but I'm trying to look at the economic viability if there's no public transport. It's not even an environmental, it's more of a social and economic issue, so I don't really know how they balance out.
Thanks, Moses. If I could just jump in, I think both Ben and Marcus have kind of outlined the fact that the site is not sustainable. It is clearly less than desirable in its location. Bus, as Ben has said, is one of many different options that make up sustainable modes of travel. So it's not just bus, and the bus service is once an hour. It's not recognised as being a good service, but it is still usable. Walking, cycling, location to railway station, etc. They all feed into that sustainability conclusion, and the conclusion in the report in front of you is it is not a highly sustainable location, and that feeds into the overall weighing scales that we come back to. The tilted balance is engaged, but we have afforded, because of the improvements, the section 106, the obligations, and the measures being put in place, officers have afforded that moderate weight against, not substantial weight against.
Carol?
Yes, thank you. On page 123, there's a site plan of the houses. I'm a bit concerned about plot 15, seems to be squeezed in amongst some larger houses. And because it's set back from, I know there isn't a rear building line, but if you imagine there was from plots 19 through to 16, it's beyond that. And I'm a bit concerned about overlooking from that, going further back on the site, overlooking onto the other plots. 15 is the issue, yes. Onto the gardens of 16 and 14. Because they've got, I presume that, I couldn't tell, there wasn't any elevations for that particular plot, but I presume there's windows facing 16 and 14.
I didn't include all the elevation drawings in the pack that you've been given, but there was a set for each different plot. Just to give you a taste of the mix going on. So any side-facing windows onto both adjoining plots would be your typical obscure glazed top opening, only serving bathrooms, utility rooms, etc. The main outlook would be to the front and the rear, so there wouldn't be any adverse overlooking concerns onto either side neighbour. It'd be a standard relationship.
Mike.
Yeah, as Moses mentioned, I too am disappointed that I can understand why affordable homes are not viable on this site, but I'm slightly vexed by the viability assessment that is available on the website. In particular, it has a valuation of 2.186 million for abnormal construction costs, and it refers to the cost estimates produced by Randall Simmons, which is in Appendix 4 of a set of appendixes. When you look at that appendix, it gives detail of the abnormal construction costs, breaking them down into the site generally and to the homes in particular. And it only gives a value of 530,000 and 295,000. That adds up to 925. My maths is correct. I've had some communication with officers over the last few days about this, and there were some additional costs for electricity and water connections, which adds to that. But it still seems to be a significant shortfall between the figures presented in the documents on the website and some mention of 2.186 million for abnormal construction costs. And there are a number of items that have to be confirmed against them, but I'd be surprised if I don't know where there's a £900,000 difference between the valuation value and the detail and the cost estimate. And I'm disappointed. I'm struggling with that.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. It might just be helpful for members of the committee if I outline in terms of developer viability. I know we've been here before in the recent past on affordable housing, and Marcus has helpfully outlined how, in principle, that works. As members, what you are entitled to do is to rightfully ask questions about how the viability assessment has been carried out. You can test in this committee whether the process that was followed was robust, whether it was transparent, independently assessed, etc. And you can seek clarification on matters within any information you have access to or on the public file. Things like the application of correct national policy, which Marcus has mentioned earlier. The local plan is a starting point, 40% is a starting point. National policy confirms that development cannot be expected to slavishly adhere to a percentage if it makes it unviable and undeliverable. So therefore, viability is tested. And there's a process for that. And if we haven't, as a council, here have followed that process, sought independent verification, then that is a concern that can be legitimately raised. What we can't do is we can't rerun the assessment, the appraisal, and we cannot substitute information we're given for our own assumptions, because we are not here in a position as a chartered valuer or an accredited independent valuer to run those assumptions. Now, the conclusions that are presented in any application have been through the sort of machine of verification, and there has been a lot of horse trading over numbers, and there always is on these. You'd be surprised how much backwards and forwards a financial viability appraisal goes through with exactly the points you've raised, where assumptions have been made, where the evidence is that market rate, is that undervalued, is that overvalued, against RICS data and so on, and material costs, you name it. So it is a very complex and very niche aspect of planning, and in particular viability. The points you raised there over 2.1 million, the assumptions are over abnormals. We can provide a very top level summary of that, but again, in terms of specific details on specific figures, that would be something that really, given information is public and the financial viability position and committee report is produced a number of weeks back, it would be probably more appropriate to address specific concerns of specific values in advance of a committee meeting. Hopefully that's helpful.
Moses.
Going back to my question about the sustainability, and the highway officer said the developer was unwilling to carry out the improvements recommended. Did that have to do with the viability assessment?
No, it was a separate discussion. So the costs that go into the viability review are construction costs for the proposal in front of us. So viability didn't come into it, if that makes sense.
It does. I just wanted to understand why the developer was unwilling to do what the highway officer recommended, would make the site more sustainable and perhaps make our job easier.
So there was a lot of discussions throughout the course of the application in terms of how potentially access via sustainable modes could be improved. The suggestion of improving the lanes to the south and creating and improving the quiet lane connection. There's already a quiet lane there. I think it's designated in the My Journey plan, and what would have happened was that emergency access to the south of the site would have been improved and made into like a pedestrian and cyclist footpath. So there was two reasons why in the end I decided, as the planning officer decided not to proceed with it any further after it was made clear that it wasn't possible to do. Firstly, the applicant doesn't actually have land ownership of the part of where this emergency access is going. In the transfer of the land from the previous owner, it was made clear that only emergency access, so they don't actually own the land, they don't control it. So it was not legally possible for them to put a footpath on that land and make it a proper connection, because they don't own it. Secondly, it was weighed up, as part of the balance. So whilst we had to take that value, has enough been done to reduce the harm, and because of the context of the not being able to go to the south, we've got alternative My Journey contributions, and we've got the pedestrian connectivity improvements. So overall in the balance, because legally it couldn't be proceeded with on the applicant's end, and also it wasn't needed to make the harm only moderate in the balance. It was agreed to move on from that suggestion and just do what we could to improve the scheme.
Hoping Ben, my colleague, has put Castle End into the Safer Roads programme. It's your patch. I've put all mine in, so I hope you've done the reciprocal thing and brought yours down to a sensible speed limit. No comment?
That also goes along with the wishes of the parish council, which Riscombe Parish Council, which I'm.
Councillor can do it, Martin, you know, you don't leave it up to the parish.
I work closely with the parish councils, but I hear you. But I'm also disappointed. I mean, my main concern about this one is sustainability. Also, you know, for people going to work, I mean, they have, you know, they either have to go to, if they realize Twyford Station, parking is difficult, they will end up at Maidenhead. Probably it's cheaper as well, but yeah, that is my only concern. I think from my way on, but I also have to make the balance at the moment, and but that is yeah, that would have been nice to have made this one a bit more sustainable from all sides. But I realize this is difficult for this site. Yeah.
To say, the buses have got better. Sorry? They have got better. And I just hope that My Journey money, although it's only 12,000, doesn't find itself somewhere completely outside of this area. It will be ring fenced for this area, won't it? No?
Planning
Don't
obligations.
tell me that.
Planning obligations do need to be justified, reasonable, relevant, and necessary, and related to the scale of development, and be used for offsetting the impact of the development within the local area. And in order to pass the scrutiny and pass the tests at national policy level, they need to fulfil that requirement. They can't just be used the other side of the borough.
Okay, Mike.
In the same vein, on page 100, on paragraph 156, there is a contribution to health of only £17,200. And I note that it says the ICB, Integrated Care Board, has a standard formula. And that does only produce about 1/3 of a consulting room. But does that money stay in the parish, or does it automatically go to the local surgery, or does it disappear into the ICB?
So the ICB have commented on the application, and they are the ones who, using their formula, came up with that figure. The idea of that contribution is that it is going to be put in a pot towards improving Walgrave surgery, which is the closest surgery. But then the way it works is that if that's not needed for whatever reason, it could be spent somewhere else. So Walgrave surgery is a priority.
Don't worry, Martin. I've got a list of all these conditions, and I'll be watching them like a hawk.
Very good. Any further questions? Would anybody propose to go with the officer's recommendation for approval? Do we have a seconder? Sam? Could I have a vote, please? This is in favor, yes. Yeah. Okay. Unanimously in favor of the officer's recommendation. We now move to the applications of the land located to the east of Watmore Lane in Winnish. These are two applications. There will be two decisions, but we will, the presentations from both the officer and the applicants and Councillor Bray will be covering both applications at the same time. So, yeah. Just give us a few minutes to set up.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen. And as you noted, we will give one presentation, but I'll refer to both applications throughout. Just bear with me a moment. Thank you, Chairman. So both of these applications are for the site at Watmore Lane, adjacent to Maidensfield in Winnersh. The first relates to 111 dwellings and it's reserved matters and it's pursuant to scale, layout, appearance and landscaping. And that's, we've referred to that as phase 1. And phase 2 is the same again, the reserved matters application for scale, layout, appearance, landscaping, and that's for 118 dwellings as well. So this is the separate phases. You can see phase 1 in the top left, which is outlined in red, and then just the reverse in the bottom right-hand corner, which would be phase 2. So outline permission was granted for the whole site, and that was one single outline permission, and I'll briefly touch on that in just a moment, actually. So to give a bit of context to both the reserved matters applications, so outline planning permission was actually determined at appeal as a single comprehensive development site. So it was determined at appeal as one complete site. It was not approved, to make clear, as separate or independent parcels with individual access points, because I know some of the objections have referred to that, but that isn't the case. It was one singular development which was approved. The phasing of it in terms of phase 1 and 2 was actually introduced later and after a Grampian condition was imposed by the inspector, and again I'll get onto that in a moment. So the phasing was essentially introduced just to make the delivery of the site a bit more coherent and to make sure that it wasn't delivered perhaps haphazardly if that wasn't introduced. So in terms of what the inspector accepted at outline stage, so he accepted the main access from Maidensfield, and he also accepted that a second access to the south is required to make the overall development acceptable. So the appeal decision has therefore, so I've just realised I've got that window popped up. Sorry. So the appeal decision has therefore established the key principle, including the overall access strategy and the requirement for a second access. So these matters are settled and should not really be revisited at the reserved matters stage. So just to reiterate what members are considering today, so these are reserved matters applications. So members are being asked to look at the scale, i.e. the building size, the layout, appearance and landscaping. As stated, the principal development and the access arrangement are already established by the outline permission. And again, as stated as well, the development will be in 2 separate phases. So just to touch on a Grampian condition, so I appreciate I've put that in the report and members have probably heard the term but may not know too much about it. So a Grampian condition, Grampian's actually from a bit of case law in Scotland, but what it means is a negatively phased planning condition that prohibits development from commencing until specific off-site works, which may be on or outside of the applicant's control, have been completed. And this is the case for a second access point. And as you've seen in the report and as I've referred to the original outline appeal, the inspector imposed a Grampian condition stating that only 111 units could be delivered until a second access point is secured. And again, these types of conditions, they're quite common actually for off-site highway works. That's where they tend to crop up the most. And in terms of the second access points, the council does own the land where that would have to occur. And at the time of the appeal, there was actually an application in from the council for 87 dwellings on that land, which was actually later withdrawn. And that was something the inspector was looking at when he considered whether a Grampian condition should be imposed or not. So any decision to deliver that access would be subject to a separate process with the council acting as a landowner, its capacity as a landowner. So if the committee were to approve phase 2 as per the officer's recommendation, it does not force the council to sell or let the applicant use that land. That is a separate process. Again, it goes back to the reserved matters. That the points being considered here are essentially scale, layout, appearance and landscaping. So just to get on to a bit of presentation about the site. So this is the application site as a whole, outlined in red. This was the outline consent. You can see to the left-hand side you can just see my cursor, where Maidensfield is. If you go to the south, that cul-de-sac is Winnash Gates. You've got Groveland's Parts and North, which is sort of more mobile home developments. To the south, you can see Oak Tree School, which is the SEN D school, the SEND school. And you've got Wheatfield Primary School. And of course, you can see the M4 and its various slip roads there. To the east of the site, along the eastern fringe, and you can probably just make out, is the Embrook corridor. So the Embrook actually flows through there, and all those trees there are proposed being retained. There's ecology works as well proposed there. So this is just a bit of a 3D aerial to show it in a bit more context. Obviously, you can see the M4 there, and you can just see how it sort of tucks into Winnash as well, and the SEN school to the south. Again, this is just a 3D aerial, and it just shows the site in a bit more context. You can just see to the left, this is Maidensfield, where the main axis would be located. So this is the overall master plan. I'll get onto the phases in a minute, but this is the overall and how it's stitched in together. Essentially, both phases use the same design ethos, and that's why we've decided to present it as one, because otherwise it would just be repeating the same things. But you can see it's very established perimeter blocks, which is what we want in terms of active frontages and providing a good urban design. You can see the landscaping that skirts around to the north and the east. That would be the Embrook corridor on the fringe there. There's a central green space, and you can also see, well, you wouldn't be able to see them, but the shapes are attenuation basins. You've got 3 play areas. You've got a play area here, a small one centrally, and then one located to the north. And you can just see how it stitches into Maidensfield here. One thing to point out on this slide actually is that there's been some comments about free routes, and as I've said, although the outline permission does establish the access points to it, there has been design measures to try and restrict free movements or to ensure that it does have residential sort of speed traffic at 20 miles an hour. And you might be able to see, it might be quite small, but there are some tabletop restrictions here. There are several throughout the site to slow vehicle speeds down. The road alignment's been looked at so that there's no sort of direct straight roads where you can just, accelerate. There's been various sort of curvatures in the road and bits designed into the road. The road width as well has been looked at so that it is a 20-mile-an-hour residential scheme. Importantly as well, there's, and I'll come on to it slightly later, there is a condition 14 on phase 2, which would block this, you can just see it on the cursor potentially, which would block this southern road, which would be the quickest route through the development. So there's no easy way through the development that way. So that would be another feature as well, which would restrict free movements. Again, though, the principle of the 2 access points has been established. So, so the design features are just an additional points to that. So moving on, we've got phase one to the top. As you can see, again, the perimeter blocks and the landscaping you can see, and the access through Maidensfield here. These are just some character areas which I thought were interesting to show the committee. The green is where it's looser density, where it fronts onto the green open space. You've got the beigey orange colour, which is a bit more suburban in context and a bit more dense. And then you've got the red areas, which are centrally located and a bit more dense development. That's where there would be flats and some of the more larger dwellings. I'll just quickly run through some street scenes. They are in the agenda, so you've probably already seen these, but again, it just shows the spacing to them, the sort of type of design of the dwellings, which again, I'll touch on in a minute. You can see as well some of the sort of landscaping as well in front of the buildings. And again here, just to reiterate, this is for phase 1, and you'll see phase 2 is very similar in terms of how it's laid out. Again, here's a bit more of a closer look at some of the buildings. As you can see, they're they have very unified design points. I'll get onto the detailing shortly. And here's some of the detailing which has been set out by the applicant. You can see it uses sort of red multi-brick as well as some buff brick, and buff is very much characteristic of Maidensfield. They've got some protruding header detailing on the brickwork, which is actually quite a contemporary feature used quite commonly these days. It's got weatherboarding as well. And ultimately, we feel it's a good mix of sort of traditional form with some contemporary features as well. And this is the southern phase 2, the southern bit. And again, you can see it's perimeter block orientated, which is exactly what we would be looking for. Again, you can see the landscaping around the buildings as well. And again, this is that character area map again, where you can see centrally it's a bit more denser. It feathers out towards the green open space. And it's sort of more suburban in context here, which again is a good way, we think, to lay out the development and give some variation in it and make it tie into the surrounding context. This is just an indicative plan, just to highlight of where a blockage to the southern access road could go. So the developer has submitted that just to show that it's not an afterthought, essentially, that there has been some thought potentially where is the best point to that, and they've shown some instances of how that could be done. But as I said, condition 14 secures that detail, and we would want that sort of formally landscaped into the scheme. And again, this is the street scene for phase 2. Again, you can see the spacing of the buildings, the general design of them. It's hard to tell that from phase 1, which is good. It shows it as a coherent development. Again here, and you can see some of the flats in the more denser, centrally located sections. Again, just some more street scenes. And again, as well, you can see the general design of the properties here with various variation, with traditional forms and some contemporary features. These are some CGIs of the development. The top one is from phase 2, and that's sort of with your back to the Embrook, looking back into the scheme, and you can see some sud spaces in the foreground and some of the properties on the edge there. The CGI to the bottom is with your back to Maidensfield, so this would be the main access point, and you can see the development there. Houses fronting on it to frame the access, but then you get to the green open space to the north. You can actually see a tabletop feature there in terms of traffic calm in that CGI. And again, the top picture is from where the secondary access point would be located. Again, you can actually see the tabletop feature there and the change in material. You can see that this part would have more of a multi-brick, red multi-brick. And the picture below is the green central open space. You can actually just see a red line of how the green open space would be delivered in phase 1. And then phase 2 would be to the right of that. And you can see how those properties front onto it, creating an active frontage and an attractive sort of usable space. Just some quick photos. So the bottom one is from Maidensfield, where the main access point, you can just see a field gate there, and it's where that vehicle is. And the top picture is a couple pictures stitched together, and that's just essentially me standing by the field gate, taking a snap of looking out into the site, and you can see the trees in the background, which is the Embrook corridor. You can just see trees sort of generally around the site. These are some from within the site, and sort of shows the landscape in a bit more context. So dealing with the top one, you can just see the vegetation. You probably won't be able to see it on the screen, but if you zoom in you can just see the very sort of detail. You can see the vehicles along the M4 corridor. The access to the site would be broadly here. You'll see them on the next photos. So moving down south again, moving down to the middle photograph, you can see this is looking sort of a southwesterly direction. You can see this Senna School here. You can just see the properties in Maidensfield here. So the axis would be roughly where my cursor is there. The bottom photo is looking more westerly. Again, you can just see the flank elevation of the property in Maidensfield there, of the site access being broadly next to it. And again, you can see the sort of tree buffer there. The top photo is much more looking westerly with the Embrook corridor behind. You can just see a property in Maidensfield there. You can also just make out some of the buildings in Grovelands Park here. And the bottom one is the SEN, the Senna School. So the development would go behind the Senna School here, would be located here. This is just some pictures I took of the surrounding area, just to show the context of it, really. So you've got Grovelands Park, which is mobile homes, Maidensfield, which is typically suburban, and you can see the buff brick actually there. And then you've got Winishgate and Clarendon Close, which are much more suburban which again are suburban in context, sorry, and they're all sort of late 20th century, so, typical suburban cul-de-sacs really. So just a few concluding remarks before I hand back. So just give me a second. So just to reiterate, the outline permission established the principal development and also the 2 access points serving the site as a whole. Notwithstanding this, design details have been implemented to limit unnecessarily vehicle-free movements. I've detailed what those are, and also speeds appropriate for a residential development. The reserved matters that are recommended to be acceptable here, again, are scale, layout, appearance, and landscaping, and they're the points we are considering. And in the officer's opinion, this is a quality development strikes a good balance between making effective use of land, green space, and landscaping. The layout is well designed into perimeter blocks, character areas, and essential green spaces are focal points. There are 40% affordable housing. There will be 40% affordable housing delivered on site, which will be distributed across the site, equating to a total of 92 units. And it is recommended for approval subject to the conditions. And as you'll see on the members' update, Chairman, there were some small tweaks to the conditions. I can go into that if necessary. And there's just one final point to highlight as well. There was one late representation received about 4:20 today. We have reviewed that and feel that the issues are addressed in the report and also in this presentation. Specifically, it referred to the overall site being served by 2 access points, which, as I say, I think I've covered that and addressed those issues. So, to hand it back, Chairman, both applications are recommended for approval, subject to conditions, and I'll happily answer any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Could I now ask Mrs. Harrison to present? No, you're second, I think. So, Mrs. Harrison, yeah. And you have, because you cover 2, you have up to 6, double time, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jane. I work for Stantec as a Planning Associate Director. I'm the agent for this application, acting on behalf of Taylor Wimpey. Taylor Wimpey is one of the UK's largest residential developers and are focused on delivering high-quality, sustainable homes and communities. Taylor Wimpey considers that placemaking is about more than just building homes. It's about creating places where people feel comfortable, connected, and proud to live. Taylor Wimpey aim to create sustainable, connected neighbourhoods for their customers that integrate well into surrounding communities. The proposals in this case will deliver 229 much-needed homes in Wokingham, of which 40% would be affordable, which equates to 92 affordable homes. The site is a proposed allocation for new homes in the emerging local plan, which is currently in stage 2 of examination hearings. Outline planning permission for this site was granted in March 2024 for the development of up to 234 homes. The reserve matters applications have been carefully designed to align with the principles established through the outline consent. The outline permission includes a Grampian condition, which prevents more than 111 homes being built until a secondary access has been provided. In accordance with this, the proposals have been appropriately divided into 2 phases. The RM for the first phase is for 111 homes, which can be delivered with a single point of access from Maidensfield. The second RM, for 118 homes, requires the provision of the secondary access and is incorporated within phase 2 of the development. The second access will be provided across land owned by the council. Taylor Wimpey is in discussion with the council in relation to this. Throughout several months of pre-app engagement in 2024 and 2025, the application process in 2026, we have engaged with officers, consultees, stakeholders and members of the public. Comments received have been carefully considered and have directly informed revisions to the layout and design of the scheme, including changes to the development block structure and open space design, as well as the mix of homes and building typologies. Taylor Wimpey has also incorporated further traffic calming measures, including a barrier to the main through route to address officer concerns that this could be used as a rat run. The development has been thoughtfully designed to respond to its context, integrating effectively with the surrounding landscape. Public open space is located to the northern and eastern boundaries of the site, making best use of existing features such as the Embrook and retained trees. A central area of open space forms the heart of the development, supported by a clear network of pedestrian routes to improve connectivity across the site. The use of tree-lined streets, shared surfacing and play spaces underpinned by high-quality landscaping will create a safe, pedestrian-friendly environment with a strong sense of place. In terms of sustainability, the homes have been designed to be future-proofed with the use of high-quality building fabric, energy efficiency measures and renewable technologies. The site includes the provision of on-site play facilities, including a lap, leap and neep, providing a tiered range of recreational opportunities for the new and existing community. A comprehensive suite of traffic calming measures is integrated throughout the development to ensure a low-speed, safe environment for all users, supporting the 20-mile-per-hour design speed across the site. The development provides significant biodiversity net gain, well in excess of the minimum 10% set out in the Environment Act, on-site net gain of over 30% in habitat units, over 25% in hedgerow units, and over 10% for watercourse units. Economic benefits are significant, including circa 7.9 million in SIL receipts to support local infrastructure and circa 1.1 million site-specific Section 106 contributions, as well as job creation during the construction phase and through the wider supply chain. Future residents will contribute to the vitality of local shops and services in Winnersh and further afield across the borough. The applications would enable a high-quality development that would secure long-term social, economic and environmental benefits in Wokingham. This is reflected in the case officer's positive recommendation. Taylor Wimpey is keen to get on site and deliver these benefits without delay. In line with their current programme, the first homes will be delivered on site this winter and the final home completed in winter 2030. I hope that members of the committee can support these applications for much needed new homes in Wokingham Borough. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jane. Now, Councillor Bray, you also have 6 minutes because it's for 2 applications.
Thank you and good evening, everybody. I'm speaking on behalf of all 3 Winnersh councillors. Before I start on my main point, I would ask you as a committee, when you consider 260224, would you please look at the position of the first house on the right as you go in through the field gate that you saw in the photo, which is very close to an existing house in Maidensfield. I really only have one objection to both applications. I get that the appeal decision has been made, and that is that if permission is granted with the conditions set out in the reports, it will create a route through the site, which will mean that traffic will be able to use it as a cut-through from the Reading Road to Robin Hood Lane. And that means that not only will all 234 houses be able to enter and leave the site via both access points, presuming that the second access is obtained, but through traffic from elsewhere will use what were residential cul-de-sacs to bypass the Winnersh Crossroads. And I do feel that if they can, they will. As anyone who has queued for the Winnersh lights at peak times will know, people will come off Robin Hood Lane to use that new route to Reading Road rather than wait. And an additional factor in encouraging people to cut through the Taylor Wimpey development at peak times is that there are 2 schools in Woodward Close which will suddenly become accessible from that side. Now, in the appeal decision, the inspector split the site into 2, as we've heard. He wanted to prevent the site feeling like an isolated island development, and he lays out the need to reduce walking distances to shops and bus services. And he specifically says walking and not driving. I've got no objection to having permeability for walking and cycling. But for vehicle movements, the inspector says only there is no technical reason that 234 dwellings could not use a single access. He does not deal with the impact of creating a cut-through for drivers from outside the site itself. Now, paragraph 34 of the agenda report says the impact on through traffic is not relevant to 260224, and it's all dealt with in 260225. But you do really need to satisfy yourselves about all the through traffic issues before you make a decision on 260244. I was going to ask you to defer 224 until after 225, but it looks like you're going to link them, and that is what I would like you to do. So looking at both layouts side by side, as you've been shown by the case officer, there are three routes, or there were three routes to get from one end of the whole site to the other, and highways are recommending condition 14 on 260225 to cut off one of those through routes, the most direct one. And they suggest traffic calming measures on the other two, specifically to discourage through traffic. And that means that they know that creating a cut through may not be a good idea, but it still exists. So for me, there's information missing from this report, which you need to have. The first is an assessment of the likely traffic movements from vehicles using the site as a cut-through. The second one is an assessment of how many vehicles from within the site will use which access. And the third is the assessment of the impact on the junction capacities. Now, on 225, those junctions are the one out onto Woodward Close, which currently serves 2 schools, and the other one is the junction of Woodward Close with Reading Road, which is left turn only and is already subject to long queues at peak times due to the lack of gaps in the traffic coming off the roundabout, which is immediately to its right. And on the other application, which is 224, there are all the junctions of residential roads which ultimately lead out onto Robin Hood Lane, particularly Watmore Lane and Robin Hood Way, where there are already issues with the school traffic for Winnersh Primary. And both Woodward Close and Maidensfield at either end of the site are currently residential cul-de-sacs and designed as such. So without an assessment of the likely volume of through traffic and reassurance about the capacity of the junctions, I think you can't make a decision. I would ask you to defer it until you have that information. If officers are able to provide that tonight, that would be great. Residents are really worried about this. I would also ask that you consider changing condition 14 so it blocks not just one of the 3 through routes, but all 3 of them. You may need more information before you can do that. Once you have clarity that the impacts on the surrounding roads of through traffic have been taken account of, then you can go ahead with making a decision on this application and on the other one. But residents are very worried about this. It's bad enough if you live in Maidensfield to have 111 houses coming out there and 118 going out into Woodward Close. But to have the idea of people going through is really concerning.
Thank you, Prue. I open it now to the floor for clarifications. Catherine.
Can I just ask for clarification about why it has to have 2 access points?
Yes, so it is in the outline appeal decision, which is appended to the phase 1. I appreciate it's a fairly lengthy appeal decision to go through. But essentially what the inspector said is, on paragraph 17, he said, accordingly, a second access to the south of the site is necessary to achieve good urban design and enhanced accessibility. Indeed, guidance for manual for streets explains that development with poor links to the surrounding area can create an enclave. Internal permeability within the scheme would be a necessary extension of such good practice. So essentially that was the principal reason that he did that. At the time, well, still the case, the council has got guidance called Living Streets, What that says in that is anything over 100 dwellings should have a second access point. So at the appeal, obviously we were against it. So the argument that was put to the inspector is it should have a second access essentially, and you should refuse it. What the inspector done is said, actually, I agree with you, it should have a second access, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a gramping condition on to ensure that comes forward. Just to clarify the point about what the inspector decided, there's no doubt in my mind that the inspector knew that was going to be vehicular access. It was shown on indicative drawings and it was discussed in great length at a public inquiry. The inspector knew that was going to be a vehicular access. So that was what was proposed in the indicative drawings. And I don't agree with that he said it when you read that section that it suggests that it should just be pedestrian. I don't think that's the case at all. And just one further point of clarification as well is in the appeal it was one singular site. It was only phased later because we felt the gramping condition actually caused a few issues with implementing the scheme. For example, you could have a case where sort of if 111 houses get built out haphazardly on the site and you've got nothing then to sort of make sure the scheme actually works on its own. So that was why it was phased, so that it could come forward as 2 units, but it also works as one singular development.
Mike.
They mostly stem from things that are in the appeal document, which I don't necessarily see in the reserved matters. So paragraph 70 on page 183 talks about the level of traffic movements increasing in Maidensfield from 335 movements per day to 1,709. That's a fivefold increase, more or less. And that the flow rate will go from one vehicle every 2 minutes to one every 22 seconds, which I reckon that's a 22-fold increase. And that's presumably just the traffic generated by the occupants of the site, not the concern expressed by Councillor Bray about the traffic that's going to use it as a cut-through to avoid the Winner's Triangle crossroads. So I do have a concern, as Councillor Bray has expressed, about the likely traffic. That's a massive fivefold increase in numbers of vehicles and a sixfold increase in the frequency. Sorry. Repeat what I just said. I am concerned that according to the appeal report, there is a fivefold increase in traffic movements per day and an increase in frequency of sixfold in what was a cul-de-sac. And Watmore Lane itself is not a particularly generous road. So I am concerned about the volume of traffic that's going to be generated by this, quite apart from the traffic that will occur from construction vehicles going in and out of the site for a significant period of time. Perhaps that can be commented on. I've got some other comments I want to make about appearance as well.
Thank you, Councillor. I think, as you noted, that is in the outline report. So it was in front of the inspector when he allowed the application, the outline application with both access points. So he understood what was happening when he approved it. I think the other thing to point out as well is that one of the reasons why it is 111 dwellings, obviously it's quite close to 100, and that was discussed at the appeal, is that I think 111 was the figure settled on, which would be one additional vehicle movement a minute rather than every 22 seconds. So that was one reason why there was other reasons as well. That was one reason why that figure was arrived on before a second access point. And what the inspector or the discussion around the appeal sort of focused on as well is that a second access point would relieve that. Essentially, it wouldn't just be, Maidensfield taking the brunt of it. And I appreciate the point made about free movements, but as I've said, that was something put before the inspector at the outline stage. He has approved the access strategy, and that's not what we're considering in the reserved matters.
Turning to layout and appearance, again, the inspector made a comment that he would want to see tree-lined routes and generous front gardens. I'm not sure having trees down one side of a road makes it tree-lined, and I'm not sure whether the front gardens are generous. He also makes a comment in clause 61. The proposal could and should, in his view, ultimately come forward with no buildings exceeding 2 stories in height, and we have quite a number of buildings that are 2.5 and 3 stories. So we haven't, it's not a condition, but I guess that's a strong recommendation, I would have thought.
Yes, thank you. So dealing with sort of the general numbers and density. So the outline permission was for, if you just wait just a moment, is for up to 234 units. So the inspector made the decision knowing that that would be the density of the scheme, because in the permission, we knew where the developable areas would be. This follows that, and we knew the green open space would be around the north and to the east. So we knew the density at the time, and the inspector felt that was appropriate. The scheme, sorry, my maths is losing me, but the scheme is actually a few units less than 234. Not that makes a huge difference. So it is within 234, and they've actually dropped a few as well to sort of make the layout a bit more spacious. So it is actually less than the inspector considered, and the inspector considered that density would be acceptable. In terms of gardens and tree-lined routes, you would see it is quite common for particularly modern developments to have much smaller gardens than perhaps post-war properties. And even like if you look at some of the properties in Maidensfield and Eastbury Park, some of them have quite shallow front gardens as well. So it was looking at the context of the site and feeling that was appropriate. There is sort of a landscaping around the primary routes, which we think is a good feature. And in terms of the heights, that was something we considered. And we felt that the interior of the scheme would be much more appropriate to put any increase in height. And we also looked at the Send School to the south as well, which is obviously quite a significant development, which you can quite clearly see from the motorway. So we felt there was a bit of context there to add a bit more height to the scheme. And also, when you do have flats and buildings of density, it does allow more landscaping to be incorporated, because then you're not having, say, 10 two-bed houses. You're including that in a much more denser block, which allows the layouts to sort of breathe a bit more. So I appreciate the points you've made and what the inspector observed, but we've looked at this quite carefully, and as the applicant said, there was quite extensive pre-app to sort of tweak the scheme and do what we felt was more appropriate, and we do feel this is an acceptable scheme in terms of layout, landscaping and scale.
Okay, thank you. One further point, I can't find it in my notes, but it talks about the one part of the site flooding. I just wanted to be clear that there's no houses to be built in the bit that floods. Is that the case, please?
That's correct, yes. As you pointed out, the east of the site is part of the Embert corridor, which is a natural floodplain, obviously, that does flood, and that's what the strategy for where the green space and where the housing has been partly derived from as well, so that none of the houses are in flood zone 2 or 3, they're all in flood zone 1, and the Embert corridor is left alone.
Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and it's really interesting to sort of read this the presentation and read through the notes. I think it really interesting looking at this. I think so it's 40% affordable housing, I believe. So that's really positive to see. So if my maths is correct me if I'm wrong. So is it 45 units in phase 1, right, and then 47 in phase 2? So I think that's 92 affordable housing units in total across. So I just think it is, whilst that it's obviously one of the larger developments we're looking at, but it's really, really positive from my side to see 92 affordable housing units in total, which would really help address, this borough's recognised affordable housing shortfall, which I think is positive, seeing probably a lot of families and younger people looking for housing would be queuing up to take that. So, yeah, thank you.
You are correct, yeah. So I did have that in my presentation, but I missed it. It is 92 through both phases, yeah.
Moses.
So just want some clarification on this Grampian condition. Going back to what Councillor Bray said, was the condition intended to ensure that there's no through traffic between the phases, And was there supposed to be like a physical barrier or design feature so that you don't have through traffic?
No, it wasn't. As I said, the outline consent considered it as one whole site with 2 access points. So it was one whole site with the access strategy being principally for Maidensfield and also a secondary one to the south. So it wasn't ever intended to be, say, a segregated development of 2 slices with it blocked up in the middle. It was always proposed at outline stage and considered at outline stage as one complete development.
So basically, having through traffic is not a violation of the condition of the development, basically.
No, essentially, the outline permission, you could say, bakes it in terms of the access strategy.
Right.
So I'm just thinking, considering what Councillor Bray was saying, and I do absolutely agree with her that whether you're on the Reading Road or not, the traffic backs up. And it's not always on one, it might not be on the Reading Road, it might be on Robin Hood Lane. And I can see where people will try and go. So Maidensfield will become a rat run. But what powers do we have, Mark? Because Councillor Bray said you could block up the 3, only one's blocked up at the moment, but that wouldn't really achieve anything, blocking up 1. You really do need to block up 3. But is that in our gift tonight?
So I'm gonna give you an answer which won't help, but I'll go on. I'll give a bit more explanation. Essentially, the standard we're considering what's in front of us tonight, which I'm sure you've heard 1,000 times. Essentially, in terms of what's in our gift, we do need to strike a balance in terms of there being permeability and legibility in the scheme as well, because that was one thing in the outline permission the inspector wanted to see. So if it was the case where we were blocking up, say, multiple routes and it's just really one route through, I don't think that would be good design, essentially. I think you would have a problem with people sort of going down roads and just finding it a sudden dead end and it not quite being a legible layout. So I think what we've done with our highways colleagues is we've tried to balance it as much as possible by introducing things like I said, the tabletops, the way the roads are aligned, the way features sort of pop out, the widths of the roads, things like that to restrict it as much as possible. Essentially, as well, this scheme has been designed to be sort of a 20-mile-an-hour residential scheme, so there's no reason why that wouldn't extend through the neighbouring streets as well. Considering the road alignments as well and the way they're designed. So I do appreciate what the councillor has said and what the residents have said, but I don't think there's much more we can do unless we produce a very convoluted, illegible design layout, which I don't think would be good urban design at the end of the day.
As a last resort, could we have signs if you come off the Reading Road or Robin Hood Lane coming off Maidensfield, you could basically have traffic for this estate only, no through traffic?
There is potential for that, yes, and it was something we have discussed. Maybe Ben can elaborate that on a bit more, but there is the gift of a traffic regulation, or as we've discussed previously tonight, where perhaps that can be put in place of no through routes or access for private residents only to attempt to restrict that. So that is potentially a feature that could be implemented, yes.
I'm not aware this happens in Wokingham and I've not seen one, but at least then the residents would have the power to call on the police to, and I know that's been done in other parts of the country, to say that our area is going to be used as a rat run, or it is used as a rat run, because as Mike was saying, the volume in Maidensfield, the cars, it's going to be now a very busy road. It's going to be like driving down the Reading Road. Not quite, but nearly. So I think at least it gives residents that kind of fallback position that they can. I know Woking won't do anything, but at least the police can, because the police can literally, if you've got a no access road, and I've done this with Thames Valley Police myself, you stand there, and as the cars are coming along, where are you going? Well, this is a no access road. So at least it gives them some kind of help. And the police will do it.
Yeah, thank you for that contribution, Councillor Smith. I'm quite happy to take on board that suggestion for the detailed design stage. The developer will have to enter into a Section 38 agreement for the adoption of the roads as public highway, and also Section 278 agreement for any changes to the existing highway. And through that process, we can mandate that certain signs are provided, and we can include your suggestion of no through route signs, and also signs which perhaps put a weight restriction on HGVs travelling through there, because we would obviously want to keep those to the Reading Road and other strategic routes in the borough. I think in terms of the design of the site and whether or not it would be attractive to through traffic, we are intending to make the site as difficult as possible through that detailed design stage that I've just mentioned, and through the implementation of tabletop speed bumps, through closing that southern route through the site, as I've previously mentioned, and through making it a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, so that it will be a slower route compared to the surrounding roads.
I appreciate that, and I get that, but you just know how difficult it is to enforce these 20-mile limits, because the police say they're almost self-enforceable or enforced, but it is very difficult, especially if you've got those traffics. And I can see it happening, but
Yeah, I take your point about the enforcement of 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and there's research into this from the Department of Transport called Local Transport Note 107, and Local Transport Note 107 advises that if you have traffic harming features spaced every 50 to 80 metres, and there are a certain type of speed hump that are a certain height and a certain steepness to the speed bump, I hope I'm not boring anyone too much, then you will be able to reduce vehicle speeds to 20 miles an hour. So I'm confident that there are physical measures we can get implemented that do keep vehicle speeds to around 20 miles an hour. I think Brian wants to come in.
So, Babe, could you just clarify that these mechanisms that are available just to members of the committee, these are available to any existing housing estate, not just what is being proposed? So, because obviously we're dealing with a reserve matters application where we have an existing legal agreement, we have existing planning permission granted, we're just looking at the layout within the red line here and the different aspects. But in terms of what mechanisms are available, if there is an issue in future on any residential street in any part of the borough, and if there was a desire from the community to install signage, could you just clarify?
Sorry, Brian, could you clarify what you mean by existing street? Does that include historic streets like Peach Street or Rose?
I'm just talking about in terms of, we have a development here, but I'm just trying to make sure we're clear with members as to what mechanisms exist aside from the planning application and the reserve matters. If there is an issue with rat running in the future, as imagine this development is built 10 years time, there's an issue. What mechanisms does the council have to address that issue?
One of the mechanisms the council could use to address ongoing issues is the road safety audit process. So the road safety audit process is an independent safety audit of any safety issues within a new development. That's a kind of a live process, for want of a better description, which it reviews the initial design, but then there are stages to the road safety audit process where you come back and you review the success of the street design within the development, and if any safety issues have arisen since it's been built, then we can revisit those.
Chair, I'm just trying to get some clarification here. We are always being told to approve the application before us. So if we are talking about negotiating other conditions with the developer, doesn't that alter the basis of this planning committee meeting?
Repeat the question, please.
I said we are advised to consider the application before us. So if we are speculating that you could go and negotiate with the developer to include additional conditions, should we then not be deferring this application? Because if we approve and you negotiate additional conditions, that sort of varies the basis for this planning committee meeting.
No, because I don't think we'd be recommending a condition because it's to be a separate highway consent, and I think it'd be a duplication if we put a condition. We could add an informative, as what we've discussed, to highlight those factors. The other point, I guess, to mention as well is that in terms of the land to the south, which Wokingham own, as part of those discussions, if Wokingham ever do sell the land to the developer or whatever, it'd be within our gift as the landowner to ask for those type of measures. But we can certainly put on an informative as a reminder that these are things that separately can be done.
Carol?
Thank you. It's more of an observation that we know how many people have more than one car. And we also know that people don't use garages. So I think the speed issue may well be solved by cars parked on the road. So, although that sometimes encourages people to do a chicane at high speed, but I think that we shouldn't ignore the fact that some parked cars can offer traffic calming as well, and that is within the gift of the residents.
I just have one comment as well. So we having this development, yeah. We have these two accesses, yeah. Initially, we need to have some sort of permeability as guidance from the one. But what we also have a baseline of what we expect Mansfield Road traffic to be, yeah, based on our, I think 1,700 whatever movements per day. What can we do then? What can residents, if this still comes a problem, even without all our best efforts to reduce a rat race, yeah, what can Wokingham do afterwards to address that one, to make sure that that movement doesn't spiral out? Because that will be in our own control. It won't be part of this planning thing, but it will be part of in Wokingham's ability to address that further. Is that fair to say?
Thank you. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, Ben may correct me, a traffic regulation order in terms is one mechanism to do that, which, as we've discussed, is consulted on before it's implemented. So that would be one potential way to, if there is a problem, and there are multiple things you can do as part of that. So that is one mechanism available to council. There may be others, or
Sorry, Martin, I'm going to have to ask you to repeat the question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we have, for this planning, we have put some restrictions or some mitigations in place to avoid this to become a rat race. Yes, but we also know that we have a certain expectations of the observed flow through Mansfield. What if, even despite our best efforts, that flow through Mansfield becomes much more significant? What can we do as a council to address that one or correct for that one afterwards, so that outside this reserved matter case? That is in our control then, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. So as I've just said, we can use the road safety audit process to address initial issues with the design of the site. Are you referring to further down the line if there was an issue in 10 years or something? Okay. Yeah, I mean, we can only seek so much involvement from the developer, in my view, to return and rectify issues. And there comes a point where we're responsible for that highway as a highway authority. And I think there will come a point where we have to address any issues in the way we would address any known issues on our own highway network, by using, funding from the council, or bidding for funding from central government in the way we would do to solve any other issue, on our road network.
Well, I just wanted to observe that it might be easier to address issues in the existing road system, because it might take a long time for this to get adopted by the local authority. I mean, I'm just thinking about Shinfield at the moment, but we have existing problems on an estate and it's just going on and on. It's not being adopted. So would you be able to put mitigations in Maidensfield? I mean, it looks pretty narrow to me, looking, and I remember it as being fairly narrow, but, could you put mitigations in outside the development?
It would fall outside the remit, yeah, of the application site. Again, I think, I think it would fall outside the application site, essentially. I think that would be difficult.
Mike?
I would have thought a very simple solution would be intelligent use of automatic number plate recognition cameras at the two entry points. And it's a very simple algorithm to sort out somebody coming in and popping out the other end in a particular period of time. My other concern, my particular concern is if we're going to shut one of these roads off, will emergency services be able to go through whatever this road shut off is, or are they going to have to circumvent large part of the estates? Because I live in a road that was built 40 years ago on a dense urban estate, and there are numerous occasions when you could not get an ambulance or a fire appliance down that road because of inconsiderate parking, although you can get a vehicle through.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'll break that answer into two parts. One's the AMPR cameras. I don't doubt that it might be technically possible, but we need to stay focused on what was agreed at the appeal here and what mitigation was considered necessary for transport issues in response to the appeal. And unfortunately, if that wasn't covered in the Section 106 through the appeal, then money hasn't been set aside for it, and we can't get that done at this reserve matter stage. The second part of your question related to emergency vehicle access, and we have had swept path simulation of this site layout, which demonstrates that fire tenders can ingress and egress the site, and that there's suitable turning heads for them where there's cul-de-sacs. We're satisfied that emergency vehicles will be able to access each part of the site, and that they will be able to get to within 45 metres of each dwelling, which is the standard required by Manual for Streets and the British standard for emergency access.
Thank you.
Moses?
Yeah, okay. So, Mark, I just wanted to confirm the drainage infrastructure for phase 1, is it independent of phase 2?
I don't know off the top of my head, if I'm completely honest. Basically, the phases have been designed, what I can say is to work independently and work together. So for argument, if it was a case where phase 1 is built out, but phase 2, for the reasons we've discussed, isn't built out, phase 1 is designed to stand on its own feet, essentially. So it wouldn't be the case where there'd be an issue and we'd sort of be forced to permit phase 2 because of drainage. They are designed to work independently.
But that will pose a problem, though, for extreme rainfall events if phase 2 is delayed. That doesn't work at all.
Repeat the question, please.
I'm saying if they are designed to work independently and you don't have contingency, in case phase 2 doesn't go ahead, then you're going to have problems with extreme rainfall events. Is there?
Let me put it slightly differently, sorry. Phase 1 is designed to work without phase 2. So if phase 2 doesn't come ahead, phase 2.1 works. And that took some time for them to work out and to lay out the site. When phase 2 comes along, that will inevitably be linked into phase 1. So it may well be that that then phase 2 does create some overflow areas and some pipes between the different suds basins and things like that. I haven't got the drainage details directly in front of me, but in terms of, as I say, how it's been designed and submitted, our drainage engineers have considered phase 1 and phase 2, and they haven't raised any issue with, you know, if phase 2 doesn't come forward for whatever reason, there's going to be a big problem. They haven't said that. They've said that phase 1 works, phase 2 works, and there's no drainage issues on that front.
Wait. So what do you think the inspector was thinking then? Because he said you need a second access. The council owns it. So let's just assume the council play ball. And we're here tonight for reserve matters. In the sale of that second access, they can impose the things that we've just discussed, not so much the NPR cameras. I understand how that could be tricky, but certainly no through traffic, etc., etc. So we, the Royal Way, as WBC, in the sale of that second access, could impose certain conditions. Or, well, the extreme is Wokingham, they don't cough up enough money and Wokingham don't sell it.
I think that's correct. We are the landowner, and therefore we could impose certain conditions on any sale or use of the land. And we could refuse anyone to use it. Like I say, this consent doesn't give us, that doesn't make us do anything as a landowner at all.
I think Councillor Smith is worth making clear that that all happens, that would all occur outside of these permissions, the reserve matters, and it would have there would be no crossover with that, except obviously the land sale.
I'm just hoping that the property department take on board this conversation tonight. Sure, approval.
But I know, I mean, there's one thing of having a condition, but you mentioned an informative. Can we, is that something that can be added even for our own sake, for Wokingham Borough Council to follow up on this one in case this becomes an issue? Is that, I mean, that is it's not for the developer, it's for us in a way to address.
No, I think we can certainly add an informative, and I think where they're helpful is an aid memoir to anyone looking at the scheme. So, for example, if it does come to property services and they are looking at sort of selling land, they've then got something on a permission which gives an aid memoir to them, the sort of things we'd be looking for. So that's where informatives are helpful, because obviously by the time things get built out, officers will be different, members will be different, so it is just helpful.
But also on this application ourselves for our own, for Wokingham Borough Council themselves, so that if it becomes an issue, that the highways, that residents can fall back on saying like, look, there's this informative, there was a risk. Can we make this a priority to address in future? Yeah. Catherine.
What happens if we approve phase 1 without phase 2? Does that fulfil the inspector's requirements?
You could permit it if you want, but I don't know what grounds you would refuse phase 2 on, but say if you did refuse phase 2, you can. They are separate applications, so in theory you can approve one and refuse the other. So just to emphasise as well, they are reserved matters, so it doesn't change the permission in principle, the outline consent. So
Okay. Any further questions in this stage? Well, most are new.
I'm a bit confused now. So are we, so if we approve phase 1, are we going to approve phase 2 and subject to assess that new condition?
no, I think what we can do in terms of discussion is put an informative on both phase 1 and phase 2, just highlighting specific traffic measures to be looked at so that it's clear when sort of the, if the sale of the land, if it does happen to the south, and looking at Maidensfield, that is a clearly highlighted thing for the people looking at it later down the line that we've looked at and flagged there is something to look at.
Because as residents, you have only two options. You have to either now address it in the reserved matter, which planning we've tried to do as much as possible, and then the second option is then after it's installed, then Wokingham is the owner, and they should address it. So if we put an informative in there that maybe if people are changing personnel, that it doesn't get lost, and at least then this can be raised as this was a risk. We need to address this one. Yep. We've discussed this, the first proposal. May I don't know, shall we just see how it goes? Shall I make a proposal to accept the officer's recommendation for proposal 1? And then, is there a second, Sam? Could we have a vote on that one? First application. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that is unanimous for. This include the informative, eh? Yeah, because, okay. Then we go to the next one. May I propose then to go with the officer's recommendation at this stage? Sam, you're proposing it as well. Could I have a vote on that one? Okay. Thank you all. We have, do we have you want to say a few words, Brian?
Just very quickly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, members of the committee will note in the update paper, they will note that the officers have reported on a planning advisory service committee review, which was undertaken the end of last year, beginning of this year. I believe some councillors helpfully participated in interviews with the planning advisory service, and so did officers of the council and developers who had been at committee. So the kind of outcomes, conclusions are summarised there. There is a link on your electronic version of this update and also an attached report for your review. But as you will see, the recommendation is very positive. The outcomes were very positive, and it puts us in a fairly strong position to adjust to any changes that come down the road from central government. Members will also note the major appeals performance update, which is just maintaining at 6.25 for majors. We have got one outstanding appeal, which is Land North of Reading Road, which we are awaiting on. And then we will move into the next reporting quarter at the end of this month. No, end of next month. So then it will change again. All right, thanks very much.
We have a training session, our biannual training session on the 2nd of June. This is not just for new members but also for everybody else. So I think please try to be there, because I think it will be good to show that we are having our training. It's online. It's on 7 o'clock. Yeah. It will be also for delegates. We will have delegates as well in the new subs they're called. But so they will also be, there will be training and for the new members. But it is also, I am asking you guys, even existing members, to join, if that is okay. Yeah, just to give you a heads up on that one. Thank you. Then I hereby close the meeting. Thank you.